Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you, Eric?
Good.
All right.
All right. Um, Thanks for coming on my podcast, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I love your content. I also just read your book.
Oh,
Fabulous.
there it is.
There it
Yes.
is, everybody. I got like a 6K resolution camera here so people can see your cover in detail.
Do you need video from me?
If you want to give it, some people do, some people don't.
Oh, I can.
If you do, I don't know. Maybe we'll get more downloads. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. I had Avi on the podcast some weeks back, and he had himself in profile. Says, "I'll give you video," and he put himself in profile. I thought that was clever.
He's probably my favorite person to interview.
Yeah, he has like the smart answer for everything. Like, I really had him on because he had this introduction to something upstairs that insinuated that something upstairs was true. I'm like, is this time travel ghost story? Like, really? And he goes, well, the intro is true. Like the introduction. And I see what you're doing there. And I asked him if he believed in ghosts, and he goes, no, but I believe in ghost stories. And if you tell me you saw a ghost, I'll believe you.
I have never seen a ghost.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I love ghost stories.
Yeah, if for nothing, if for no other reason than the spook factor, they're fun. But I've never seen a thing. And I've also managed to miss UFOs and Bigfoot and everything else. I just haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I've become a bit of a skeptic over the years because I actually got into an argument on Instagram where you know how like you look at Instagram and they start pushing more content like that to you. So I keep getting UFO content, and I'm like, doesn't it does it like register to anybody out there that with the proliferation of HD technology, UFO footage is still shitty?
Right. Well, that's the big problem. And then there's also the problem of the unbelievably difficult task of crossing space-time and why anyone would do it just to come here and vaguely appear on various cameras and also apparently mess up people's crops and things like that. If you're going to put that much time and energy into crossing interstellar space, you're going to do more than that. So I've always been skeptical on that, on those grounds, that these UFOs, if they are indeed of alien origin, aren't really behaving like aliens.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and it kind of sucks because when I was younger, I used to be obsessed with unsolved mysteries and all the science fiction shows, and they really painted this picture of the universe as there's a lot of mysterious shit going on out there. But like 20 years later, every single one of those like stories have been debunked. Like
Right.
the signs, or I guess in the UK they were like stomping down the fields.
Yeah, the crop circles, and there was a time period from, I think, my recollection. You may recall the same or differently, but in the 1990s, where there was a bunch of unknown, unexplained things floating around. But as people chewed them over, they started finding problems. And then I think we also realized that there are a lot of people in this world that will fake something. Try buying a Rolex, from I don't know, just some shop somewhere instead of an authorized dealer. So when you have that situation, and you also have a situation where writing books about the paranormal or writing books about UFOs and things like that is extremely profitable, or making YouTube channels about it, then you run into an issue, that you may not be seeing something that's even real.
Yeah.
But even still, there are core, interesting cases and things like that they seem to be free and clear of that. And I think those types of things just stay unexplained. Who knows what they were?
Yeah, and there's something also just romantic about having at least some part of our reality unknown.
It is. There is something. But I have I find that the mysteries of science fill that role for me, which obviously I make a living off of talking about the mysteries of science. And there's stuff there that I'm convinced we will never know the answer to. You know, there are things that have happened within the annals of science that we'll never explain. And there are some of them that get downright weird, like the wow signal, which appears for all intents and purposes to have been a some kind of radio signal from technology that does not appear to be ours. But unless it repeats, you can't study it, and you can't verify it, and you can't do all the things that you need to do to scientifically say this was real. So it goes in the gray basket, and there it stays, presumably forever.
Can I pick your brain for a little bit about what you think we will and will not eventually solve?
Sure.
Let's start with the proton. Do you think it'll decay? Do you think we'll figure out if it'll decay?
Well,
Or
that's
is
a good
that
question.
unsolvable? I had a guy on last night. I asked him the same thing.
It's solvable if you have trillions of years to watch one. But my sense is that I think that I don't think that one will be solved. Again, because the observation time to actually see it happen and verify is very, very, very long. But I could be wrong. You know, there may be, we don't really know what the rules are. I mean, maybe a proton can decay much faster than what we currently think it could, in which case you can reasonably say a proton decays, and that eventually the universe will fall apart from proton decay. But at this point, I think that one would be a really hard one to answer. And it's also one of those things that I don't think a lot of people think about because it's so far in the future where it would become an issue that we probably will be long gone, you know, by that time. Or will be something that doesn't even care about protons anymore. We're living in another universe we created or something.
Yeah, the anti-proton universe.
Yes.
What about what was it? The Higgs field that is it's questionable whether or not it'll tunnel into a lower state, or was it another field?
No, that's that is the vacuum state of the universe.
Oh, the vacuum state of the universe.
The question is it at its lowest vacuum state, or is it just halfway down the hill sitting on a ledge, essentially? Yeah. And we don't know the answer to that. Again, you would need to know one of two things with that one. Either you would need a much, much more complete understanding of the universe than what we have, in which case that's centuries away, if ever. I mean, it's possible we may never have a complete picture of this universe. The other option is if it does tunnel to its lowest energy state, then we'll get obliterated. It'll explode at the speed of light and travel across the universe and changing the laws of physics as it moves, and we won't even see it coming. We'll just cease to exist.
Do you how often do you think about these things?
24/7. No, I mean, given what I do, science fiction writing to YouTube videos on this subject, I put a fair amount of thought each day into it. But it's fun for me. You know, this is what I naturally would think about. I'm always in a constant existential crisis.
Yeah, same. How long have you been interested in science fiction? Going all the way back?
Oh, all the way back. Absolutely. I would say my first interest, and if you hear a cat, there's a cat right here.
I got 8, so it's all good.
Okay, I got 2. So one of them is here, and he likes to talk into the microphone, which might add interest to the interview. It goes back to 1981, 1982, watching the original Star Trek series in rerun, and it fascinated me, and I made a point to try to watch every single episode. And there was actually one I missed, which was about space hippies that I didn't actually see until the DVD age. But that was it. That was what started it. And then what really pushed me over the edge was I started getting I'd been interested in rocks, geology, and fossils and things like that. And I asked for a microscope. So my parents bought me this little Tasco set of a cheap microscope and a telescope. little 30 millimeter telescope. And I used that telescope to look at Saturn. And I saw the rings, and I was absolutely floored. And it's been that way. That must have been when I was around 10. And I've been fascinated with this stuff ever since.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me till late that you can actually photograph the rings from the surface of the Earth.
Yep.
Because until recently, when I guess Saturn was like as close as it'll be for a while, a news helicopter in New York just pointed its camera towards the sunset and just shot a photo of the rings with like their news camera.
Yeah, it's very obvious. And few things in astronomy are as good as the pictures, but Saturn is. And it's very obvious, even in binoculars. You can just look at Saturn and see the rings.
That's far out.
If your eyesight's good enough.
So, what were you doing before you started your YouTube channel? I'm curious.
I was a. It's even harder to explain than being a YouTuber. I was an expert in medieval economies and coinage. And I also had a side business as a violin maker. So I've never really been a very normal guy as far as jobs go.
With the violin maker thing is a podcast all on its own.
Yes, I apprenticed as a violin maker instead of going to college. And I did that for 20 years.
That's
over 20 years, 21 years.
interesting. I pegged you as a PhD, to be honest. I'm like, oh, this guy must have. That's awesome. Wow. So we learned something new. So you start this YouTube channel because, from what I understand, the story is there was something in the science news there wasn't a lot of content on YouTube about it, and you wanted to create content about it.
That's correct. I had been. This would be. Cast your mind back to the first few months of 2016, and I was thinking, I had a novel out already, and I was like, how do I promote that thing? And your agents and all that will tell you, well, you got to get social media going and all this. And I'm like, what social media could I do? And it was YouTube. And I was going to start a science fiction channel and just talk about general science fiction and the history of it and all that. But I thought that probably wouldn't be that huge if I did that. Well, at the time, there was a story in the news about a star, Tabby's star, or KIC 8462852. And the star was behaving very strangely. It still is, but it was behaving extremely strangely in light curves taken by the Kepler spacecraft, to the point that it was on the table that it might be some sort of alien megastructure that was orbiting the star, which should block light in a similar way, if they were building a partial Dyson sphere or something like that. And I went looking on YouTube for content about it because I was fascinated with it. And I found nothing but alien claims and UFO claims, and nothing was correct. It was just sensationalist stuff that was being put up for monetization and making wild claims that it was an alien megastructure. So I thought, okay, well, how about I do an overview of what we actually know based on the scientific papers? And I very carefully point out that it was never very likely to be aliens. It was just likely to be something we have just never seen before that was astrophysical in nature, which is what it is. So that's what started it. And I thought, well, I'll get 300 views, something like that, maybe some subscribers, and I'll plug the book and maybe sell a few copies. And then it broke 100,000 views, and I was like, uh-oh.
How long did it take to break 100K?
Less than a month.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it went viral. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I got something. So I made other videos in succession, and the channel just kept growing and growing and growing. And right now I've got videos that have surpassed 2 million views, and then I've got 280,000 subscribers on one channel, and then 200,000 subscribers on the other. So it just grew from there. But I backed into it. I didn't really anticipate that I would have anything other than a loyal, following of a few handful of people that like my books.
Well, for me, I started listening to it maybe 2 years ago, kind of around the time I graduated from an MFA program. And it was really just about, I was looking for content that kept my imagination fired.
Right.
Like everything I do is about keeping me inspired to keep going.
Sure. Yep.
Even the podcast. I want to hear creatives talk about their work. And there's just something about the ideas that are presented in every playlist you have. And by the way, the whole playlist, the way you deal with playlists, opened my eyes to their actual purpose. For the longest time, I didn't know what to do with YouTube playlists. But you have a great use of it. Trappist one playlist, a more playlist. My favorite is the Cosmology. But regardless of where you go, there's inspiring content that just, it's like having a drink with that buddy and you're just philosophizing. You know?
That's the ethic. That's what I intend. There's a few things that I intend with that channel that I've learned over the years from feedback. You read your comment section, and I read every single one on both channels, and you glean certain truths from that. And one of them is, it's fun to sit around with a buddy and have a beer and talk about the universe. And this is sort of a one-sided conversation version of that. The second thing is that people appreciate that it's real science, and then that's why I always cite papers and say where these ideas originate from. And the third thing is that about half of my audience just likes to fall asleep to the sound of my voice, and I'm happy to help. So they call it ASMR or, sleep aid, whatever. And it's very good for that because, laying in bed at night, trying to fall asleep to space content, on what I do with it, with a quiet voice and, all that sort of thing is very valuable because imagine, being able to help people in that way, insomniacs and things like that to fall asleep. So that's about half of what my channels accomplish. And I'm rather proud of that. I put people to sleep with my channels and my books.
Yeah. And in a good way.
In a good way.
In a good way. And, it reminds me of when I moved to New York in 2003, I couldn't sleep. And I used to just imagine myself in like an Enterprise type ship with the hum. And I had to imagine the hum, and it's almost kind of like that. But the idea of visualizing stars outside just kind of made it peaceful enough to sleep. And I had to do that for a couple of years.
There are YouTube channels dedicated to 24/7 broadcasting the hum from the Enterprise. So this is something that does help people when you're in that sort of quasi-conscious state just before going to sleep. There are certain things that can just push you right over the edge. And for me, that was talk radio, late night talk radio back in the 90s. I would put on Art Bell or something like that and just fall asleep to it. And I'm sort of the modern YouTube equivalent of that sort of thing.
Do you stream the audio of your content to the various audio platforms like Apple or Stitcher?
No, we don't. We are right now exclusively YouTube, but we are working on a podcast option that, people request that they want to be able to download it, and it will be available somewhere like that. Yes, soon.
Yeah, cool.
Part of the problem is that I don't have any time restrictions because it's a YouTube video. I can talk with someone for 20 minutes or I can talk with them for 2 hours. Doesn't matter. And that doesn't really lend itself well to formats where, you have one 30-minute podcast or, or even worse, radio. So that creates somewhat of an issue. And then the other thing is converting it, all of those videos. I mean, I have 320 videos on my original channel that I would have to convert over to audio. And that's quite a task.
Yeah. Well, what does your workflow look like from a technical standpoint?
Technical standpoint, my workflow, I work 7 days a week and I work off of lists. So I will make a list that says I need to edit, video, and I need to work on a book, whatever task I have at hand. It's actually a lot more complicated than that, but whatever task I have at hand, and I don't feel right if I don't complete the list in a day. So that's the motivating factor to get, complete my workflow for the day is to finish the list. But that list includes most aspects of life, take out the trash, take out the recycling, whatever, all the way to edit chapter or whatever of the book, the current book that's being written. So it's a regimented sort of thing. And I sometimes even use a tomato timer, which is a method of half-hour work, blocks. So you set the timer, you work on a task, and as soon as that half hour is up, you move to the next task, and then you sort of rinse and repeat the whole cycle. Sometimes I do that. Other times I get sick of the whole thing, and I just lay on the couch all day.
How long? So with the narratives that are you reading a script that you write, or are you just talking about it?
Okay, it works two different ways. On my original channel, that is scripts that I write and research, and I don't deliver them exactly. I'll write them, and then when I'm actually recording it, I'll think, well, that doesn't sound right, so I say it differently. So I work off of a script on that channel, but Event Horizon is totally unscripted. That's just me having conversations with people. And I probably wouldn't even need a script on the original channel, except I'll forget half of what I need to say. So,
yeah, I can imagine. There are people who've been in it for years that they'll be off book one moment, and the moment they're recording, wait, what?
Yep. Yep. It's much easier if you have a script. And then the other thing too is my scripts serve as a record of the research that I've done for the video. So I print them out and bind them up as reference on these ideas and subjects that I cover, which, when you make hundreds and hundreds of videos and you're researching different topics every day, you forget some of them. And it's useful to go back through these scripts, about once a year and see what was there.
I think the reason I had it in my head that you were a PhD is because you cite everything.
I use academic rules. Yes.
Yes. And there are people who have come through the academic system that don't do that. Like, it just wasn't hammered into them enough. And I really appreciated that, because that's one of the rules I have for this podcast is if you go into the description of each episode, it'll say intact discourse. That's like kind of what I call that section. Everything I use to research the person and everything they've mentioned during the podcast. And it's just there. And I think that that's so important.
For me, it's what I would want to see, because if I want to dig deeper into a subject, it's useful if it's right there. And that's why I cite the papers and do the links like you do. And it's just for anyone that wants to dig deeper. And I always assume that my audience is highly intelligent, given that they're interested in this stuff, and very, very possibly would want to go and dig deeper. So that's why I do that. And the other thing is that being an author, credit is important, so I give credit to where credit is due,
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
Where?
Yeah.
I, two places. I grew up and am born and currently located in St. Louis, Missouri. And when I was young in my formative years, my dad was an engineer and he worked for a company that was based in Portland, Oregon. So I lived there for 5 years, something like that. So yeah, between Oregon and St. Louis.
All right. So you were on an interesting podcast that I really enjoyed. I don't recall the name of it right now, but I'll make sure I link to it. Where you and I think it sounded like there were two other people on the podcast, and you were just talking about the Fermi paradox and the Great Filter. And you were debating on whether or not we've beat the Great Filter, or if it's to come, or if it even exists at all.
That happened in, I know exactly what you're talking about. That happened in, that debate was between me and Fraser Cain, of of YouTube fame. Fraser's a huge YouTuber too. And then it was moderated by a Twitch streamer named Skylius, who does a science channel over on Twitch. And that happened at Palm Springs, California. We were part of a science-themed vacation, and we thought, well, let's all do internet content, and we did. We just decided to do that one while we were standing at the bar drinking margaritas, and that's how that debate came about.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, and it got me thinking more optimistically. Like, oh, I never like, because I do think about the Great Filter a lot, maybe a little too much, and the Fermi paradox, and it never occurred to me to maybe consider the idea that we beat it, maybe simply by even going to the moon or something like that. I mean, it's maybe it's too optimistic, but the fact that never even occurred to me.
The Fermi paradox is, I think, already explained by one filter, and we are far past it. And that filter is, and this is just my gut feeling, but that filter is the leap from eukaryotic to prokaryotic life, or prokaryotic to eukaryotic life, however that works, meaning one cell to multiple cells, the difference between simple and complex life. It took Earth 1.8 billion years, life on Earth, to make that leap. And it required one organism to absorb another without digesting it. And that, to me, seems very unlikely to happen very often. And that probably is the filter. So if we head out into the universe, we will find very, very simple unicellular life. And a lot of it, probably not hard. But very, very rarely will we find anything more complex than that, which is just something that's, an amoeba or something like that, something more complex than that. And to get to our level, intelligence is probably very, very rare. And that explains the Fermi paradox, that its intelligence is simply unbelievably rare, and that it may only happen once or twice in the lifetime of a galaxy, and there's no guarantee that it'll happen exactly at the same time. So the two civilizations might appear in a galaxy over its lifetime, but live at different times and never know about each other. So I think that that's probably the most viable solution to the Fermi paradox. And that when we worry about things like, well, will we destroy ourselves and things like that, the point is we haven't. We're still here. Yeah. So, and the 20th century was rough, but we're here, and right now we're going through a natural disaster, a pandemic, and we're here, and we have figured out, most of us have figured out ways to cope with it and trudge on. So I don't worry too much about the filter being ahead of us, because, like I said, I think it's far behind us. The strongest hard filter is billions of years in the past.
How you been doing during the pandemic?
I've been very productive because I have plenty of time to work. I think I had the stuff, to be honest with you, and I had a period about a year ago where I had some symptoms, very mild, and then it was gone. And I've been out to shop and wearing my mask and doing all those things, and I have not gotten it, which I probably should have, because I was no more isolated than anybody else in this situation. So I think I had it, and it just wasn't a bad case. That said, watch me come down with it tomorrow and end up in a hospital or something like that with it. It's just such a weird, dangerous, virus that I mean, nobody living, other than maybe a few very old people that saw the 1918 flu, would recognize. That said, I'm just staying holed up here, writing, making videos, and awaiting my turn for the vaccine.
Yeah, it's pretty much how we were doing it on this side. We think we got it as well, my girlfriend and I, and like ended up getting the first shot of the vaccine. We're getting our second one on Sunday. New York City's been rolling them out like crazy. But yeah, we had this weird like 3.5 weeks where our respiratory systems were just not acting normally, and it didn't even feel like a cold. It was just a weird thing.
Exactly what happened to me. I was like, I felt a little bit ill, like I had a little something, or which I get migraine headaches, so it's hard to tell when you're actually sick when headaches make you sick. And I just thought, well, something's going on. And then all of a sudden, one day I woke up with breathing problems. And I'm like, what did I just, am I getting COPD here? What happened? Because that killed my dad. And for about 3 days, I had pretty distressing breathing problems. And then it went away. And everything returned to normal. And that was it. So that's why I suspect, as you do, that I had it was because of a breathing problem. And I had been exposed to someone that had been traveling frequently in aircraft and been to China, right at that time. So it was, it seems like I probably had it. But again, I say that and watch me come down with it tomorrow. And I'm like, no, that wasn't it. This is awful. Or, something like that.
Yeah, like a week before I started getting those symptoms, New York City hadn't closed, and I had gone to this massive art opening somewhere in Manhattan, and there were like hundreds of people in this. It's almost like a Comic-Con type setting. We had booths, and but it was all art and high art. And yeah, a week later, I'm out of commission. I'm glad it was mild though, because I'm an asthmatic and I'm a severe asthmatic, and so this thing is especially.
Oh yeah.
I'll be glad when it's done and dealt with.
Well, one thing can be said: we are past probably the worst of it. If you look at daily cases, that's dropped, and it dropped early. You would expect a winter bump to have lasted longer. So I wonder if a lot more people haven't gotten this thing and made it through than what we really know, because you really only know the tests and testing cases. But if somebody gets a sniffle, a mild case of it, and never goes to the doctor and never gets tested, well, that's a case too. So I think that this virus might have been a way more widespread than what was thought, or what the testing would indicate, and that now we're seeing sort of the very, very beginning of a herd immunity.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hope that makes a lot of sense. And I live in an area of New York where they won't test. Like, I think me and my girlfriend are like a handful of very rare people. It's a very conservative sort of area. They won't test. They won't get the vaccine. They want to go to the bar. I mean, it's just, and yeah, they're definitely going after herd immunity in this part of the city.
Are you like Westchester County or something?
Staten Island.
Staten Island.
Yeah. But we live in like the North Shore where the ferry lands, and so pretty much our neighborhood is the only part that confirms to the rest of New York City liberal culture. But the rest of the island is like a big hot spot for COVID.
I live in St. Louis, and this is a swing state. So you've got both extremes, and you'll see on the one hand, everybody's wearing masks, except you'll see some guy driving a big truck, not wearing a mask with a Donald Trump flag flying. You'll see both types. And I just wish myself that people would look at the science instead of the politics of this thing, because a virus doesn't care who you vote for, so we should look at it that way. But people tended to sort of look at it politically, and I think that muddied the waters, more than it needed to be.
Well, that's the thing is, and I kind of brought this up on a podcast yesterday. I had this physics professor on, and I'd mentioned to him that I don't think most people even know what the scientific method is. They don't even I took this animal behavior class in my undergrad where we were taught it in terms of you observe, you document, you come to your conclusion, and most people don't know what that is. They weren't paying attention in their high school science class.
That's true. There are people that have a superficial overlook on it, that they think they know, but they don't actually know the real philosophies and methods within the scientific method and why it is the way it is. So you'll have people that, are not skeptical about UFOs, but yet no science, So you have those types. And then you also have types that everything they need to know comes from as a religious book. So
you had this one video. I tried to find it before we started this podcast. I couldn't find it for some reason. I don't know if it was recently privatized or whatnot, but it was about the tachyon telephone. Am I getting that?
Oh,
right?
yeah, that's the tachyonic anti-telephone.
Yeah. Can you unpack that a little bit? I loved that concept. I think that was in the. I don't remember if that was in the cosmology or the Mind Blown playlist. Might have been in the Mind Blown playlist, but
Could have been both.
yeah.
The playlist, I just organized those based on, this ticks this box and this box and this box. And that's how I organize those. And I'm about to add a bunch more to sort of differentiate it out even more, because when you got hundreds of videos, you have to find some way to organize them.
Yeah.
But the tachyonic anti-telephone is based on the concept of the tachyon. And the tachyon, general relativity says that, okay, you can't ever reach the speed of light because it takes infinite energy to do so. And there is not infinite energy in the universe. But it doesn't forbid the opposite, asymmetry, where it takes infinite energy to slow down to the speed of light. So this led to the hypothesis that maybe there are particles that never slow down to the speed of light, and they're called tachyons, and they've never been detected. The nature of that, because time and space are linked, the faster you go and the closer you get to the speed of light, the more time dilates. And the idea is once you go past it, time goes backwards. So a tachyon would give you an option, if they exist, of communicating with the past. You couldn't travel to the past, you couldn't do anything, but you could send messages to it. And which violates causality. You could tell your grandfather, send him a message that says, don't have kids, because, they turn into me. And then you suddenly cease to exist or something like that. But that's the idea of the tachyon anti-telephone. But we have never seen anything like a tachyon. Thought we did once, but it turned out the detector was miscalibrated. So the best way to explain the situation with those is that they're not forbidden by nature, but that doesn't mean they exist.
Yeah, I found that's the case with a lot of this idea that in math they can create virtual particles, but they don't know how to actually create particles or something like that. Like, this is why I have these guys on, because I just don't understand it, and I'm trying to unpack it bit by bit. But yeah, the guy yesterday was talking about, we can create lots of things in the mathematical models, but we don't really know how to create.
Well, the reality of it is that we use math as a way to describe the universe, but the universe does not care one bit about math. It isn't mathematical. It doesn't care about it. It doesn't even know what it is. It can just merely be expressed by it. But because that the way math works, you can start doing things like putting a minus symbol in front of something and creating a negative number. of the exact same one, and it's totally valid in mathematics. So you could do something like looking at a dimension, of space, and then put a minus in front of the number that you've assigned to it, and all of a sudden you've got an anti-dimension. And the reason that we don't have those is there's no reason to invoke it, but occasionally there is. And that's the case with the tachyon, is that, well, what if, but it doesn't mean it really exists. It just means it's a concept on the back of a napkin written in as an equation, ultimately. Yeah. But sometimes those turn out to be real, I mean, it has to be said. So like the Higgs boson. So sometimes it's useful to play the negative numbers games, but sometimes it's pie in the sky. For example, mass. You can conceive negative mass, something that weighs less than nothing. But that doesn't mean it can actually exist in the universe. The universe may just simply say, no, that there's no way to make it. There's no physical way to make it, even though it's not prohibited.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a new book coming out soon?
Probably at the end of the year. If I finish it, I do have one that's actively being worked on. And it's probably, see, that book, the conception of it is post YouTube channel. So the first two books that I wrote, or three books actually, were written not really with the YouTube channel and that experience in mind. Whereas this one that I'm working on deals directly with the subject matter of some of the videos, some of the topics. And I'm trying to create, which I think I'm onto something with it. I'm trying to create the incomprehensible nature of what alien contact would be, and what, it's very likely not going to be something like, a Klingon, it's a alien with a funny forehead or something like that. It's going to be a lot weirder and stranger and ambiguous. And that's what I'm trying to convey with this new novel. And with any luck, it'll be out by the end of the year.
Is it been, I don't know, I don't want to say stressful, but has the experience of writing it been more present in your mind, knowing that you have this huge audience waiting for you?
No, that doesn't bother me. I've done this for 5 years now, and all of the surprise of getting a big audience has sort of, I've gotten used to it. So I'm used to it. The stressful part of it is trying to get it out there on my timeline that I'm telling people. So I say to you, it's probably by the end of the year, but for all I know, it could be the middle of next year. It just depends on what snags
right.
I get caught up in.
Yeah. I find that that's the case with a lot of creators. Delays happen. I look forward to it, and I hope that you'll come on again to talk about that once I've read it.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I only got a few more questions, and then I'll promise I'll let you go. Have you ever considered lending yourself out to do voice work?
Oh, sure. No one's ever asked me, believe it or not. But if someone came up and I liked what they were doing, yeah, I would say yes. I hadn't really ever intended to be a voiceover artist, but I obviously can do it. So I
I think you could do it. I think you'd be very successful at it.
And I've got the studio for it because, you always want to improve what you do. And when your YouTube channel grows, you invest some money in some pretty decent equipment.
Oh, that's an interesting point. At what point did you decide to really invest in this thing? As a reference, I literally waited 20 years before buying my first camera. every other camera I borrowed.
I probably, well, the thing is, I have to I have to make a caveat because I had some equipment already because of my background with musical stuff. So I had some uh, mics and such that were for recording musical instruments, and in fact, I still use a mic that was designed for musical instruments. But but I really started to invest and realize that I had something growing and producing income in early 2017. About a year after I started the channel, I was like, okay, this is something I need to invest money and time into and build into something. So it was about that time.
Well, that was interesting. That's good. I always wondered about your story, and I managed to get little pieces of it over the past year. But this is what if honestly the fact that you were a violin maker before. There's something that makes sense with that, because there's an artistry to that's apparent in the way you're constructing these videos.
It's not all that different.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, the idea of writing science fiction novels and doing science videos also go hand in hand. So there is a relation going through this, and the uh, the study of history, which is what I did in a nutshell, economic history, also plays into this because you hear a lot of the history of science in what I do. So yeah, they're all more related than you might think.
Yeah.
And as far as actually crafting the videos and doing that stuff, I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't done all those jobs. They're all sort of created a perfect storm for me to be able to do it.
That's a good. That's a good. We found our thesis, I think.
Yeah, more or less. I, if there is such a thing as doing what you're intended to do, I think I am. You know, if there is such a thing. So
Yeah. Well, you're doing great. I love the content. I love your writing. I hope you'll come back and you know keep producing. Stay productive.
oh, I'm not gonna stop.
Your work
I,
matters.
when you love what you do, which I do, I dearly love it. It isn't work.
Yeah.
It's passion, and I consider myself unbelievably lucky to have found the acorn known as YouTube, and am able to do something with it. And it's my full time job. So it I'm very very thankful for it, and very thankful for my audience too. That there are that many people that'll listen to me, you know, flap my gums and talk about science.
Just a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll do an outro. Do you have a headshot that you can send me for the bumper?
Uh, my orange, unwhite balanced one that nobody lets me remove. Everybody's like,
Why
"Oh,
don't they let you remove it?
there's inside joke on the channel. I took that photo was actually taken by a girlfriend, and in a bathroom. And I was like, I need a quick photo for my YouTube channel, which had no subscribers. And so she snapped it, and it's terrible. It's unwhite balanced, and I look like an axe murderer. And everybody's like, don't ever change that picture. And I'm like, why? Because it's funny. So I can't change it. The viewers will not allow me to change that photo. But I got something around somewhere.
Yeah,
That
anything. You could
yeah.
use that or whatever you want. Or if you want to introduce them to maybe an alternate perspective, we can do that. Yeah, no, I see where they're coming from. If you get that sponsor that pays for that professional photographer, then they think you're selling out or something.
Well, that's it. And then there's also a certain level of camp, you know, and cult following and things like that, where you know you certain things you don't want to change because they're traditional, you know,
Yeah.
and if you do change them, then you become something different from what you were. I like to be the guy that you used to watch late at night on cable public access, you know, just trying to do some kind of show, and it just builds around this sort of this little narrative and, you know, a canon of things that happen, and I like that. So I often, like with the running theme jokes on my original channel about Chrysler LeBarons, Um, and I can't even remember some of them because I always put an outro in there that's just wacky, you know, whatever I can think of. So I hear a lot about Chrysler LeBaron's McRibs, the McDonald's McRib sandwich I've mentioned, and things like that. And then on Event Horizon, I have Anna and a quantum mechanical possum that appear at the very end too. And I just sort of like that thing to make it sort of campy, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm a science fiction author. That's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I was gonna see if you would do the outro for this. Something about the universe in which we live. What was that? How's that go?
Thanks for listening. I am futurist and science fiction author John Michael Godier, currently doing something. And be sure to check out my books at your favorite online book retailer and subscribe to my channels for regular in-depth explorations into the interesting, weird, and unknown aspects of this amazing universe in which we live.
And that's our podcast.
Just to prove that's actually me doing that.
That's beautiful, man. And you do that every single time?
Every single one, going back to the very first video. And then I do variations on what I'm currently doing, and just have fun with it. And yeah, that's probably, and the thing is, here's the sad thing, talking about selling out, that keeps people listening to those videos to the very bitter end, which YouTube absolutely loves. So
yeah, they if I found that if I finish a video, they'll push that content to me an hour later or 2 hours later. Mm-hmm. If I don't finish the video, they won't push the content.
That's right. And so you and this worked this way in television. You want to keep people interested to the very end, you know, so they see all the advertisements and everything else and all that stuff. But at the same time, what's more important is to get a laugh out of people, you know, and sort of create uniqueness, you know.
We got that down. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm going to go, and I'm actually releasing a video in about 2 hours, and then after that I will be back to writing on that book.
Oh, perfect. All right, I'll let you do that. Fans are waiting. Thanks, man.